So we're talking about the way that sex can be used for military purposes. The classic way is Yael and Sisera. But another way was, in biblical times particularly, if you could get the Jews to sin against God, you could take away God's favor and blessing. It's very important to understand the role of God, because Jewish people exist only because of the miracle of God. We don't realize it. Just take it for granted. Of course, oh, I'm Jewish, and I wake up in the morning, I'm Jewish all day. Anti-Semitism, there's always anti-Semitism. Every so often we have to get ready to move to another country. We know the drill. We don't appreciate that we really should not exist anymore. Really. As you know, because of anti-Semitism, everybody's an anti-Semite. A lot of anti-Semites, not everybody. And everybody who is an anti-Semite, no one is deterred from anti-Semitism by virtue of facts contradicting the anti-Semitic assumption. Of course, they just redefine the assumption. For example, you're a tenant and you haven't paid rent for 5 years, and the landlord has finally decided to throw you out. So you decide, Jewish landlords, I hate Jews. I hate Jewish landlords, they throw you out. So then someone shows you a Jewish tenant being thrown out of his home by a non-Jewish landlord. In other words, here's a fact. Landlords eventually throw you out if you don't pay the rent. So an anti-Semite says, wouldn't you know, Jewish tenants, they never pay their rent. And that's how it works. I owe money on my loan. Damn Jews, they own the banks. I hate Jews. And what about the other way? The bank wouldn't lend me money. Damn Jews, they own the banks, they wouldn't lend me money. And here's a Jew that owes money and isn't repaying the debt. Damn Jews, you can't lend them money, they don't pay. So you can hate Jews for everything. Damn Jews, what was Herzl's theory of Israel? Herzl was a guy, basically. I'm not one of those that thinks upon Herzl. I don't love Herzl. I'm a real Orthodox rabbi. And not only am I an Orthodox rabbi, I also tell the truth. I'm not saying that Orthodox rabbis lie. God forbid. Most Orthodox rabbis just keep their mouth shut. They just don't say what they're thinking. Otherwise, they can't hold their jobs because the congregations won't keep them around. So Orthodox rabbis know not to say what they're thinking, keep it quiet, and once a year at the annual convention of the Rabbinical Council of America, we all get together, and for 3 days, we can tell each other what we're really thinking. Not that we lie, we just don't say. Fact is, Herzl's not a great guy. Herzl was a goy, basically. Herzl knew nothing from nothing. He was a reporter for a newspaper in Austria, and they sent him to cover the Dreyfus trial. Dreyfus was one more experience of the accursed French. I hate the French. I truly despise France and the French. I'm a bigot when it comes to French. What about a French Jew? Oh my God, I love them. I feel so bad for them. My God, you're French. Oh, I hate the French. Why do you hate the French? You're supposed to hate other minorities. I don't hate them. I have a very good feeling about Black people, Hispanics. I just don't like the French. You know why? Because Blacks don't have a history of 2,000 years of persecuting Jews, nor do Hispanics. Well, Spain, the real Hispanics, not the pseudo-Hispanics in South America. The real Spanish. But the French, in the year 1242, they burned Jewish books. Hitler got all his ideas from the French. St. Louis IX, Louis, in 1242, he burned 24 cartloads of Jewish books in front of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, the one that burned down later. He forced Jews to wear a star, a badge of shame, on their garments. Hitler got all his ideas from Louis IX. That's the French in the 13th century. They expelled all Jews from France. Then they let us back to burn our books, then they expelled us again. Voltaire. Everybody talks about the French, the foundation of democracy. Voltaire was an anti-Semite. You know, he fraternity, liberté, fraternité, democracy. But when it came to the Jews, he hated the Jews. Even World War II. The British are no Metzia, but at least they weren't Nazis. All right, they had Sir Oswald Mosley. But by and large, the British simply hated the Jews quietly. But the French, they actually had the Vichy government under Marshal Pétain. You should see a movie called Sarah's Key, if you haven't seen it already. It streams either Amazon or Netflix. Sarah apostrophe S Key, K-E-Y. Extraordinary movie, wonderful movie about the French. Hate them, hate the French. I like French food. You know, you have to make exceptions. You have to know the difference between the Vichy government and Vichy Soir. So, but I hate the French. So what you have happening is that Jews have so become accustomed to French anti-Semitism and European anti-Semitism everywhere. So Theodor Herzl was sent by his newspaper in Austria to cover the Dreyfus trial. It's a big story. Like Sean Diddy Combs, got to cover that story. We might be going to war with Iran. Putin is killing half of Ukraine. Yeah, but you got to cover Sean Diddy Combs. That's the story of the day. Ukraine, there'll be a war next year also. Iran, they'll be back in 2 years with another nuclear bomb. But Sean Diddy Combs, do you cover him now? So you send a reporter to cover Sean Diddy Combs. O.J. Simpson, that's what the people need to know. Tragically, the Texas flood. So anyway, Herzl went, just a Jewish schmendrick, knew nothing from nothing, and he didn't even know it was about a Jew. And he starts covering. Dreyfus was accused of treason, of giving secrets of France to Germany, military secrets. And he was stripped of all of his titles. He was found guilty of treason, and he was put into an island. They sent him on an island. I think it's called Devil's Island. He was the only one. He and his guards. And he was put to live in solitary isolation for the rest of his life. The French bastards, le bâtard, and B-A-T-A-R-D-S. I also can't stand that they never pronounce the S at the end of words. I don't like the French. So anyway, he's writing the story, and he's writing all this evidence that this guy is a traitor. And the trial was in a stadium. Sean Diddy Combs is not on trial in a stadium. OJ is not on trial in a stadium. Get the coverage like a stadium. Millions followed it. But they put this guy on trial in a stadium. And what surprised Herzl, as he's covering the trial, is everybody in the stadium are yelling out things, goddamn Jews. Kill the Jew. Fucking Jew. Herzl couldn't figure it out. What's this? This guy's a traitor. What does it have to do with being a Jew? And as he started covering the story more and more, he began to realize it's not about treason. It's about the guy was like the highest ranking Jewish officer in the French army. And they knew someone gave the French military secrets to the Germans. And number one, may as well blame the Jew. Number two, you don't want to admit that a Frenchman would be capable of being a traitor to La France. Can't admit that. Because all Frenchmen are patriots. And suddenly, something woke up in Herzl. Holy smokes, I'm also a Jew. Would they look at me that way? And Herzl, as he was sitting through the trial, started coming up with a whole ideology. He started, while he's sitting through a boring trial, he began to realize Jews are always getting picked on. Jews are the worst tenants, Jews are the worst landlords. Jews own the banks, Jews are bad borrowers. And he started becoming interested in developing a theory. Why is there so much anti-Semitism? While he was covering the trial. And he came up with a theory. Because he was a smart guy. He was a smart guy. He didn't know from being Jewish, but he was a smart guy. He thought outside the box. And he came with a conclusion. His conclusion was, what is it about Jews that's different from every other people in the world? French, British, I don't know if they were American. Yeah, they were Americans then, 1800s, and Russians. And the difference between Jews and everyone else in the world is that everyone else in the world has their own country. And Jews are the only ones without a country. That's the only thing I can figure out. This is the mindset of a guy. He didn't know from nothing Jewish. He didn't know from the Torah. He didn't know that Jews get punished by God if they sin, that we have a unique covenantal relationship with God. So if we sin, we get punished in a way that non-Jews don't get punished. And that God will turn away from us if we don't honor him and worship him and maintain the covenant. He didn't know that, not to his dying day. So what is different? I'm a journalist. I've covered stories all over the world for Austria. Now I'm in France. And the common thing that makes Jews different from everyone else, Jews don't have a country. And if Jews would have a country with Jewish prostitutes, literally, that's in his book, Jewish prostitutes and Jewish politicians, good Jews, bad Jews, anti-Semitism would come to an end. And thus began political Zionism, which is why a lot of Haredi Orthodox are anti-Zionist. Forget about Neturei Karta, they're mentally ill. But a lot like Agudas Yisrael, UTJ, Shas, they're kind of non-Zionist. They're not anti-Zionist, they're non-Zionist. Because they interpret Zionism as Herzlian secular Zionism, and they don't believe in that. The idea of Jews having a country like Goyim, that's not for them. By the way, if you scratch me deep enough, it's not for me either. If the whole purpose, Rabbi Meir Kahane used to say, if the whole purpose is to have a Hebrew-speaking Portugal, there's no point. Israel was not meant to be a Hebrew-speaking Portugal. It's the chosen nation having the land that God gave them. But Herzl didn't understand that. So Herzl said in his book, Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, wrote in 1897 or so, he wrote a book that said, the Jews need a country of their own, der Judenstaat, a Jewish state. And so he became an activist, and he took on himself, meeting with world leaders. Hi, my name's Theodore Herzl. You can call me Ted. And I'm here to meet with the Pasha of Turkey, who control Israel as part of the Ottoman Empire. I'm here to meet the heads of England. I'm meeting with, and he would come wearing a tuxedo, like a real mensch, like a real dignified guy. And he would say, I'm here on behalf of the Jewish people, but a chutzpah. And I'm negotiating, we'd like a land and we'd like the right to come in large numbers to move into our indigenous land. And he actually got somewhere. And he called a World Zionist Congress in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland. And Jews from around the world actually came to this thing because, like religious Jews, always dreamt of a return to Zion. We pray for it 3 times a day. It's part of the davening. V'liyerushalayim recha bracha minta shuv v'tishkom b'tocha ka'asher dibarta v'ne'otabak rabbi amenu binyan olam. May we return to Yerushalayim. V'techasena einenu b'shpat zion barachamim. And may we return to Zion. May we see you, O Oh God, return to Zion. And after we eat a meal that has bread, we say, Berchat HaMazon, Uvenei Yerushalayim, Kodesh Meher B'Yameinu, may you rebuild Jerusalem speedily in our days. It's in our mouth all day long, even in exile. So the religious loved it. And the Marxist socialists in Russia dreamt, all these assimilated left-wing Bernie Sanders types of the previous generation, dreamt of a Jewish Marxist country because they had lived under czars in Russia. It's 1897. It still was Russian czars. Remember the communist revolution, the Bolsheviks took over in 1917. So on the one hand, Tsar Alexander II was assassinated in 1881, and that kicked off a huge Jewish immigration to get out of there. And that's when the Jews started coming to America and England and South Africa, 1881 to 1914, when the Tsar got killed. But the next Tsar, Nicholas II, the Romanovs, still were in power till 1917 when Lenin took over. So in 1897, it was 16 years after the mass emigration to get the hell out of there, but 20 years before everybody needed to get out of there. And yet all these Jewish communists like Trotsky, who loved communism. They were among the leaders of the Bolsheviks until Stalin came in and surprised them. You don't have a place for us here. And just as I began the rest of today's class, the capitalists blame the Jews for communism. Damn Jews. Trotsky and all the Jews that were involved in communism, Kamenev, Zinoviev, all the leaders on the original Politburo with Stalin were Jews. Damn Jews. Even now, Bernie Sanders, communists through and through. And then the flip side, all the capitalists were blaming Jews for communism, and the communists were busy killing all the Jews. You're a bunch of capitalists. Karl Marx. His parents were Jewish. He converted to Christianity. So we get blamed. The Goyim blame us, the capitalists blame us for Marx. He was a Jew. Yeah, but he's not one of our Jews. He converted to Christianity. He's yours. Well, we don't believe you. He was originally yours. And then the communists blame us for Karl Marx. But how can you blame us? We come from Karl Marx. No, you're not from Karl Marx. You converted. Everybody hates us for the other reason. So, just as you had Orthodox Jews, oh my God, this crazy Austrian journalist is starting Zionism. And so you had Rabbi Moliver, early great rabbinic Zionist leaders. At the same time, all these communists, all these Bernie Sanders wannabes living in Soviet Russia, but having come to realize they can't get to be communists long-term in Russia because they're going to kill us. We don't understand why. Whereas we're better communists, actually, but Stalin is killing us anyway. So we want to be communists, but they won't let us be communists in Russia. Oh my God, Herzl, what a great idea. We could have our own country and we can be communists. We could make it a Jewish Soviet Union. Imagine communism without anti-Semites. Wow. Where can you do such a thing? This guy Herzl's finding a place for us to do it. We'll do it. We'll take it on. So all the communist Jews also became part of the Zionist movement. In 1897, World Zionist Congress, half of the delegates were Orthodox Jews that hate communism and believe in God, and half of the delegates hated the Orthodox Jews, but they all wanted to go to Zion. And Herzl brought them an interesting choice. He said two things. He said, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Just like our class. Thank you for coming. If you like this movement, subscribe. Just like our class. And then, number two, he said, I make a prediction here today. In 50 years, we will have a Jewish state. And this guy, He was practically a goy. He was not God's prophet. He wasn't Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. This guy said in 1897, there will be a Jewish state in 50 years. And guess when the United Nations, November 29, 1947, son of a gun, the United Nations created the Jewish state on the 50th anniversary of Herzl saying there's going to be a state in 50 years. Heck of a thing. So don't ever write off what someone says. You never know, like Bil'am, when God is putting prophecy in a person's mouth. So they had the thing, and then they had the Second Zionist Congress. And this is great. At the Second Zionist Congress, Herzl came with good news and bad news. First of all, hello, all the delegates. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming. If you like what we have to talk about, please subscribe and send out links to all your friends. Get us more Zionists. I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we're not going to get Palestine. It's been known for Palestine for 2,000 years, ever since the Romans renamed Israel Palestine. The bad news is I just met with England, and they told us we can't get Palestine. Not going to happen. But they told us, unbelievable. They told us they'll give us Uganda in Africa. I know you've never heard of it. It's on the map. Look in the map. Somewhere in Africa. It's located near somewhere else in Africa on one side, and then somewhere else on the other side, and up and down. It's called Uganda. And they're going to give it to us. Good news, we have a Jewish state. And do you know what happened? Just like a rabbi of a shul, the board of directors fired him. Basically, the Zionist Congress voted, get the hell out of here. You guy, we did not come to get a Jewish state in Uganda, wherever the hell it is. And he died of a heart attack. Like a year later, his heart was broken. I spent all this time creating a Zionist movement. I brought them all together, a one-man show. I created Zionism, and they fired me, which he deserved. I would have voted fire him also. Can you imagine if we had a Jewish state today in Uganda? We would have had one of the prime ministers of Israel would have been Idi Amin. On the other hand, I guess they wouldn't have had to hijack a Jewish plane to Uganda, to Entebbe. I guess they would have had to hijack the Entebbe plane and bring it to Jerusalem. We could have had Prime Minister Idi Amin. Even better, we would have a Landsman now running for mayor of New York. Mamdani came from Uganda. It's like God's like a stand-up comedian. You see what you could have had? Of all the places on earth, right? Like Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. Of all the places on earth, you end up in this coffee shop. Of all the places on earth, you could have been in Uganda. So they got rid of Herzl. Now, why am I ragging on Herzl? And how did I get onto this? Because the whole world has an issue with the Jews. Either we hate you because you are in Palestine, colonialists, Zionist colonialist imperialists, the land, free Palestine, river to the sea, or we hate you because you don't have a country of your own. And if we would have been enough for Africa, they really could have called us mamish an occupying force. What business do we have to be in Uganda, for goodness sakes? It would be true. Even the best propaganda. What business do we have to have had a country in Uganda? White people tried that in South Africa. They got away with it for a century or whatever. And eventually they got kicked out. Because really, what business did white Africans have to have minority rule in South Africa? And what business would Jews have minority rule in Uganda? But actually, we were indigenous to Palestine, which is not really called Palestine. You know that story. Okay. So half the world calls us their occupation, imperialists, colonialists, and half the world was, you don't have a country of your own. Everywhere we've gone, there's been anti-Semitism. And this is why, another issue, the anti-Semites blame us. Half the anti-Semites blame us for not getting our hands dirty. Jews don't work with their hands. Jews don't sweat. Jews don't farm. A non-Jew works with his hands. Jews sit on Wall Street investing our hard-earned money. We work in the farm. They own the banks and the investment firms. They get rich off our labor. The Jews own the banks, and they're lazy. So how did it come to pass that the Jews own the banks? How did Jews end up in investments? You know how? Because Jews figured out, this all, by the way, we're talking about France. You can't talk about anti-Semitism without talking about everywhere. From France to Uganda to Spain. You know why Jews don't have farms? Because every day we get kicked out of another country. So if you deal with diamonds, you put them in your shoes. And Baruch Hashem. Or you set up an investment firm like Rothschild. So you're in a ghetto, and you have an investment firm, and you have 5 sons, and you send one to London to open up a branch, and one to Paris to open up a branch, and one to Basel to open a branch, and one to New York to open a branch. And then when the Goyim throw you out of your country, you have money all over the world. And if Baruch Hashem, you have 5 sons and 5 branches, you can afford to get thrown out of 4 different countries and still have money. That's how we ended up investments and Wall Street, and became Shylocks, which is the news of the week. So that's how it happened. That's why Jews don't have farms. If all of my money would be in a farm, and then they throw me out of America, I can't bring my assets with me. Instead, that's why Jews went either into diamonds or the Haredim on 47th Street in Manhattan, or education. If you make me a doctor, when you throw me out of your country, I just have to learn how to say all those words in another language. Lung, transplant, heart, transplant, kidney, transplant. I just need to know the words. Or you make me a lawyer. It's a little more complicated to learn another legal system, but much of it is the same. Civil procedure, tort law, a lot of it's the same everywhere. Or whatever, educate, or just go into STEM education. Be a high school teacher, an elementary school teacher. That's how Jews ended up in education and professions and diamonds, because you could take that with you, and you always had to be ready to get thrown out. So as we go into class today, we start off with this notion that we're different from all other people. And Herzl had no clue that God is the story with Jews. We are not the victims of anti-Semitism. When you see all of these things on YouTube, why is there anti-Semitism? How do you explain 2,000 years of anti-Semitism? What happened to Candace Owens? What's with Tucker Carlson? What's with Mamdani? And everybody's got a theory. You want to know what it is? Do we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And do we honor the covenant? If we honor the covenant, he protects us. Not every day in every way. Because then there's no Bechira Kavshit. There's no free choice. Bechira Kavshit. If only good things happen to those who believe in God, there's no free will. If you would grow up in a world where every guy with a yarmulke and every woman with a sheitel who keeps Shabbos and kashrus are millionaires, and all their kids come out perfectly, and they never get sick, and all Jews that break Shabbos and break kashrus and all these things, they all die at age 30 of the worst imaginable diseases, then what would happen? You'd be a religious Jew. Because, so there has to be free will. So a tzaddikus like Ellen might die at age 64 of cancer. And I can't explain why, other than that there's a certain element of randomness that God, it's not random. But God inserts an element of randomness in the world because there's a world to come. So this is just a stopping off place, a prose door, an entry hall to the world to come. That's why my father at Tzaddik died at age 45 of leukemia. And my Ellen died. And why, on the other hand, Bernie Sanders is still around at 80. Because Bernie Sanders, when he's dead, either he's going to be going to hell or his soul will be destroyed. But he won't have a place in the world. I'm not God. I don't know. Maybe he will have a place in the world to come. Maybe he did something righteous when he was a kid. I don't know. That's God stuff. I'm not qualified, above my pay grade. But that's what we truly believe. That's what we say at the 3-day Rabbinical Council of America convention, when we can speak our minds. God rules the world. And the reason there's anti-Semitism is to keep us honest. Because if everything good happens to Jews who abandon Judaism, which has been America for the last 30 years, oh my God, all of Jewish history, never been anything like this. Never been anything like this. What Jews had in America, a little bit in Iran, Persia, just before Haman, a little bit in Bavel, Babylonia, just before Nebuchadnezzar went bad. But there were times in Spain, whenever Jews had it good for a long time, Jews stopped observing Torah. And Jews started intermarrying and left the faith. Look what goes on here in America. We never had it so good. In the 70s and 80s, when I was at Columbia, there was no anti-Semitism. I got elected to the university senate. There was no anti-Semitism. You had half the faculty were Jews and they were all pro-Israel. Everybody was pro-Israel. It was that, many of you were alive then. It couldn't be a better time to be a Jew. In Goy land, in exile, the JDL, we could use the land of the Goyim, America, to fight for the liberation of Soviet Jewry. It was actually a location as a vehicle to free Soviet Jewry. Rather than fighting to protect our own from the Muslims, we actually could be based in America, using America, leveraging our friends in America as patriots in America to free Soviet Jewry, where Senator Henry Jackson and Congressman Vanik and presidents used American power to free Soviet Jewry. What happened during those 30 years? We started marrying out, started intermarrying, gave up Shabbos, and started creating a generation of Bernie Sanders and Ben and Jerry's. So I'm not just talking politics to be a conservative. This is not about MAGA. What happened, you've seen it over the last 30 years. Can you imagine Jews standing in the streets saying, I support Mamdani? Forget about Republican, Democrat. Can you imagine Jews, Schumer, Gerald Nadler, I support Mamdani, Mazel Tov Mamdani? Can you imagine it? Can you imagine Jews going in the streets with big T-shirts, not in our name? Israel, not in our name. Marching for the Muslims, the Islamists, from the river to the sea. Free, free. Can you imagine it? It took 30 years of things never being so good for everything to collapse. Herzl didn't understand that. The reason for anti-Semitism, when the Jews turn against God and abandon God, he abandons us. One of two ways. He either punishes directly, or what he does is Hester upon him. God does not have to punish directly. God does not have to send lightning bolts to knock people down. All God has to do is turn his face and let the natural course unfold. He did not, I love, not really, people who blame God for the Holocaust. We don't have time for Holocaust. We need 10 years to study the Holocaust. Can't be done in 5 seconds. But when people come and say, where was God during the Holocaust? I don't say it to them because there's no point. But my first thought is, do you keep Shabbos? Do you keep kosher? Do you go to mikveh? Does your wife go to mikveh? You're angry at God for not keeping his part of it. Do you keep the part? Do you keep the covenant? At least tell me you keep the covenant, and then we could talk about it. You don't even keep your part of the covenant. So in other words, you can eat treif, you can eat pork, do on Shabbos, violate Yom Kippur, intermarry, and then you're in a position to yell at God if he doesn't save you from exactly the fruit of your behavior. You put your faith in Germany. You abandoned Israel and put your faith in Berlin. You declared Berlin your new Jerusalem. You gave up Orthodox Judaism and in Germany created a new form of Judaism called Reform Judaism. You brought organs into the temple. You stopped believing in God. You acted like Christians. You intermarried. And he turned his face. What's the hard thing to figure out here? He simply gave you what you put your faith in. You put your faith in Germans. No. You got Germans. How did Hitler rise? Hitler did not take over by fascism. He was freely elected. Germans voted, just as New Yorkers just voted. They voted. You put your faith in Germans. They had an election. They elected Hitler. And then Hitler, democracy. And he used things, and he got worse and worse and worse. And then you started saying, God knew it's your job to save us. You married out. So what Bil'am came up with, and if you're wondering, where did this all come up with today? This is where it comes from. To understand the concept that if Jews turn away, God forbid, from God en masse as a national enterprise, we are in big trouble. Herzl, that's the lesson you don't know. Because Dreyfus was not kosher, did not keep Shabbos, nor did the Jews in France, Bechlal, in general. Dreyfus didn't even know he was a Jew. It took a goy, Emil Zola, to write an op-ed article that was page 1 of Le Figaro, where he wrote, J'accuse, I accuse my brothers in France, my non-Jewish brothers in France, of perpetrating the worst anti-Semitic fraud in French history. Otherwise, nobody knew what's going on. And he turned the tide. God turns away from the Jews. And if the Jews are serving God, God makes miracles. And that's why there's a state of Israel today, not because Herzl had a dream. We'd be in Uganda and we'd be gone by now. He came up with the idea. The communists of Russia created the government. They did the dirty work. Ben-Gurion, the communist, and Yitzchak Rabin, the communist, literally, and Golda Meir, the communist. You didn't know they were Marxists. They were all communists. And if you want to know, why is it that for the first 50 years of Israel, from 1948 until the 70s and 80s, why is it that the Democrats were the big supporters of Israel and the Republicans were the anti-Zionists and anti-Semites? What happened? Everybody tells you about, there was always a bilateral support for Israel in America, bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans, and it's all Netanyahu's fault. Netanyahu destroyed the historic relationship between Israel and the Democrat Party. It's a lie. And they don't even know they're lying. They just don't understand. Israel was Marxist. Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, Moshe Dayan, Yitzchak Rabin, Shimon Peres, Abba Eban, they were all Marxist communists. The kibbutz. Everybody in America, oh, kibbutz. I'm going in the summer. I'm going to go to a kibbutz. I'm going to pick peaches. You're going to pick peaches. So you come home. How was it? Oh, my God, I love it so much. Afar sikim, I learned the Hebrew word. Forsake. Forsake, because you forsake everything that Judaism is. And you went to Israel for some, you have no idea that kibbutz is communist. Did you notice when you were at the kibbutz in the summer that all the children do not sleep at home with their parents? Instead, there's a children's shelter like an orphanage, and all the communist parents at the kibbutz send their kids to live in a commune, and the parents visit them like once a day for breakfast. And all the kids grow up in the commune. That's the kibbutz, a commune. And you work picking your peaches, and then there's a profit at the end of the year, and everybody gets the same amount. And nobody gets more if they are more industrious, or less if they're more lazy. Everybody gets the same amount from each according to his ability to each according to his need. If you're capable of doing more, we'll pay you more, or we expect more. You won't get paid more. We expect more because you're capable, and you'll be paid what you need. All because you're more capable doesn't mean you get paid more, because you don't need more. You're just more capable, and we expect that. That's communism. So at the end of the year, equitable. Everybody gets, that's what Israel was. That's why the Democrats loved it. Bernie Sanders spent a year in Israel at a kibbutz, and he remembers it as a wonderful moment. People say, how could such an anti-Zionist, how could he talk so lovingly about the kibbutz? Because they don't know what you're learning tonight. Because he's a communist. And he spent a year with communism, mamish, beautiful communism. And then he had to come back to America, Nebuch, and live with capitalism. And so that's for 50 years. Israel was run by the Labor Party, the Communist Party. They actually had a coalition that included Mapam. The main party, Mapai, Mefleget Poalei Yisrael, Mapai was the Labor Party. That's sort of like a real left-wing party, socialist like the Labor Party of England. And then there was Mapam. And that was Mamish, Mefleget Poalei Marx or something, whatever the mem stood for, the communists. When Stalin died in, I think, 1953, they took out a full-page ad in their newspaper mourning the death of Stalin. We mourned the great leader. There's Jews in Israel. Stalin was busy murdering Jews in Russia. The Doctor's Party was going to have mass murder of Jews, and yet they're mourning the death of Stalin. And that was the government of Israel. So the Democrats loved them. That was a left-wing government, and that's why they loved them. And then Menachem Begin got elected in 1977. End of the love affair between Israel and the Democrats. It took them 2-3 years to figure out what's going on because they couldn't believe it. It's sort of like what happened in Argentina. It takes a little while to realize that the Peronistas have been ruling this place for 1 billion years, and now Javier Milei is ready to be a Chabad Jew. Takes a little while. Is this really happening in Argentina? Same thing. What's going on? A right-winger? Who is this guy, Menachem? I remember they used to pronounce it Menachem. Menachem Begin. So who the hell is Menachem Begin? And what's his deal? And after 2-3 years, they figured out the Menachem Begin, Menachem Begin, he's right-wing. And then Shamir, Yitzchak Shamir, and then Bibi Netanyahu. So what happened? They started to see Netanyahu started selling Israeli-owned, government-owned corporations. El Al was owned by the government. He privatized it. He privatized the electric company, privatized this, privatized that, privatized the economy. What the hell happened to communism? So they turned on him. They hate him. Nowadays, people don't even know why they hate him. But the change happened because he turned Israel into a capitalist society. He was Secretary of the Treasury. In Israel, it's called Finance Minister. And he moved Israel to the right. Israel became right-wing. And he started giving the Orthodox more influence in the government. Not enough, but more. And all of a sudden, the Democrats turned on Israel. Because Bernie Sanders, Ben and Jerry, George Soros, what happened to my Israel? What happened to my beautiful communism? But on the other hand, the Republicans fell in love. Son of a gun. It's like, especially the evangelical Christians, thank God for them. It's like a dream come true. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming soon to a theater near Palestine. It's like all of a sudden here we are praying for generations for the return of Jesus, but Jesus will not come back until the Jews return to Israel. And the Jews to return to Israel, real Israel, Judea, Samaria, not Tel Aviv. And we never had a hope. How are the Jews going to return to Judea, Samaria? And all of a sudden, Begin, Shamir, and Netanyahu, and the Jews are returning to Judea, Samaria. And that's why Jerry Falwell and John Hagee and all of them suddenly they're going wild. And the best supporters ever. So what's going on in today's Parsha that we learned last week, this week, and next week before we go forward beyond that is that when the Jews serve God, we are blessed. In 1967, God, not the Jews, decided it's time to return to Shechem and Hebron and Jerusalem. And we didn't know it. When you study with me or otherwise the 1967 war, look, I don't care what the Goyim say and what the anti-Zionists say. If you're a Jew and you love Israel and you're really honest, you know that we did not by any means start a war to expand Israel. You just know it. Forget about the politics. You just know Jews don't start wars in the modern era to expand Israel's territory. It started because in Egypt, Nasser decided to destroy Israel and drive us off the face of the earth. And he got Syria to join him, and he got Jordan. Israel fought a defensive war and ended up expanding in Judea, Samaria. We didn't try. And you've learned from me 100 times that Dayan gave orders to Mutagor, don't take the Temple Mount. And Chief Rabbi Goren told Gore, you got to take the Temple Mount because there's no one in the way. You got to defy the orders. And Gore finally came back and said, all right, we'll take the Temple Mount. And I risked court-martial. And he ended up telling Dayan. Dayan said, didn't I tell you not to take the Temple Mount? And Gore said there was static on the walkie-talkie. I couldn't hear you. I just heard you say Temple Mount. So I took it. I didn't hear don't. Maybe that's what Biden's problem was. Don't. My Rav, my Rebbe, Rav Tendler, my Rebbe was Rav Moshe David Tendler. Zechet Tzadik Livracha. Of all the Rebbes under whom I studied, my high school Rebbe was Rav Yaakov Dardak, Zechet Tzadik Livracha. He had the impact on me to change my life as a freshman in high school. And then Rav Moshe David Tendler when I was in Smicha program in REITs. And I learned a great amount, not only Gemara, but Hashkafa worldview from Rav Tendler. Rav Tendler held that you do recite Tachanin, you do not recite Hallel. For those of you with a religious background to know what I'm talking about, on Yom Ha'Atzma'ut. He held Yom Ha'Atzma'ut, Israel Independence Day, is not a religious day. He wasn't an anti-Zionist, he was a mega-Zionist. But he said Yom Ha'Atzma'ut is not a religious day. He said Yom Yerusalayim, that's a religious holiday. On Yom Yerusalayim, you recite Hallel with a bracha, and you do not say Hallel and Tachanin. But you do say Tachanin and no Hallel and Yom Ha'atzma'ut. On the day that Israel declared independence, it's not a holy day. It's not a bad day. It's a good day. You should have pita and hummus and tahina that day. But on Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day that we took the Temple Mount, that's a holy religious day. And he explained why. He said, what makes the 5th of Iyar, Yom Ha'atzma'ut, that a guy, a socialist Marxist Ben-Gurion, woke up that morning and decided today is the day that I'm declaring independence. It could have been the 4th. It could have been the 6th. He decided finally that Jabotinsky was saying for 20 years he should declare independence. That day, he decided. But Tendler said, you don't make a holy day out of the day that Ben-Gurion decided. He says, but Yom Yerushalayim. Dayan said, don't take Yerushalayim, and God overruled him. Even though the government of Israel tried to stop taking Yom Yerushalayim, they couldn't help it. God brought Mutagor's army into East Jerusalem. God brought Jordan into the war. They shouldn't have gotten in. God destroyed Jordan's army. God brought Israel's army, and that's the day we took the Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount. That makes it a holy day. When the Jews observe God, miracles happen. So what was the Jewish response to the Six-Day War? I got a letter. I'm born in 53, so I was 13 and a half. I got a letter in the mail addressed to me. They got me on a list from the UJA. I'll never forget this. I'm pulling it out of my hat right now after 70 years, 60 years. Dear David, we of UJA are writing you for donation. We've just seen the miracle of the Six-Day War. That miracle was not a miracle of God. That was a miracle of Jews who donate to the UJA. And because of donations like yours to the UJA, we were able to send money to Israel so they were able to take Jerusalem. I remember that. I remember I brought it to yeshiva. I was so upset. I was the way I am even back then. I was so upset. How could they put that in writing? How could they think that? It wasn't the miracle of God. It was the UJA. Ever since then, I've never donated to Federation or any UJA ever, 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 ever. Not a penny. I give to Torah sources. And that was the mindset of Jews. The majority of Jews had a mindset after 67, we had better weapons, we had better training. Arabs are bad fighters. Arabs are cowards. We are the ones who beat them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a lesson in 1973, 6 years later. You're such good fighters. You're so smart. American weapons are better than Soviet weapons. Arabs are chicken. So take a look at what happened at Yom Kippur War. I was just talking to someone today about the Battle of China Farm during the Yom Kippur War. Tragedies during Yom Kippur War. So many deaths, so many tragedies. So how is it possible that in 6 years the Arabs became such good fighters and the Jews became such bad fighters? God's favor was lost. The Jews needed a potch. We had to be slapped. You put your faith in yourselves. Kochi v'yotzem yadi asali et hagavura hazot at Yeshua hazot. My strength brought me this great success, valor. No, your strength brought you nothing. And that's the story of the Jews. And what you just saw recently, I talked about it last week. I always talk about it. Those pagers and those walkie-talkies that blew up among the Lebanese with Hezbollah and what's gone on in Gaza and what went on in Iran, it's all because of the hand of God. Yes, great intelligence, great use of military, the hand of God. With a little bit of bad luck, the spies could have been revealed, discovered. This could have gone wrong. All you needed was Kamala Harris. That's all it took. Do you know what a miracle it took? We had no idea what God was preparing. How it finally came out during the debate. What if that didn't come out? He was already a mental vegetable, but it had not come out. What if it still didn't come out? Who has a debate in June? The debate is supposed to be in August, in October, November. He has a debate in June. He becomes a mental vegetable just at the right moment. The whole country sees it. They can't cover it up anymore. So what should they have done? They should have had a primary. Go ahead and select Shapiro. Okay, a Jew is not going to win. Have a primary and come up with somebody who could win. They have some very good candidates. Imagine, what if Joe Manchin had run? Manchin would have killed Trump in an election. If they had Manchin running with Kirsten Sinema, instead, Kamala Harris had all this money in a campaign, campaign finance. She had all this money. She could use it. The others couldn't access it. It was given for Harris. She's vice president. Baruch Hashem, they gave it to her without a vote. The only thing they knew is one time before she ran, and she didn't last till Iowa. She never got a vote. She's the only person ever ran for president, never got a vote. What a miracle. And she started off with all this money and the DNC convention, and it was hers. The only thing that could go wrong is if people would get to know her. So Baruch Hashem, there was time for people to get to know her. If the debate had been in October, there would not have been enough time for people to get to know her. She complains people I didn't have enough time to campaign. Her defeat is because she had too much time. If she would have run for 1 month, she would be president. Baruch Hashem, she had 5 months. They got to know her. And then Trump gets shot, and the guy misses him. It's a miracle. How did he miss him? And all of it, it's all miracles. It's all miracles. Everything that happened. And it all happened so that Israel would win the Iranian war. And nobody knew it. This is a miracle. So what we're learning here with Bil'am is this is real, and we don't believe it enough. We don't appreciate it enough. That if the Jewish people turn away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we are doing in America, Rahman al-Islam, tragically, bad things can happen to Jews. I'm afraid for what can happen to American Jews. And we're seeing it. When they say, we can't believe it. Who saw this coming? I saw it coming. Dov, how could you see it coming? Rabbi, how could you see it coming? I saw it turning away from God. The Jews of America turning away. They're marrying out. They're turning away. They're so confident now living in America. They deny their Zionism. They turn against Zionism. The Zionists talk about two-state solutions. The non-Zionists make up half of them. Schumer, the guardian of Israel, endorses Mamdani. And so does Gerald Nadler, the last Jewish congressman out of New York. And Ben and Jerry. And Ben goes on Tucker and tells him Jesus is what happened? We're losing if we don't turn back. But at least Baruch Hashem and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Eretz Yisrael. There's a strong Torah community, and it's getting stronger because the religious are having children and the non-religious are moving to America. And the religious are holding and the religious are growing. And this is critical. And this is what was happening. Bil'am said, I tried to curse them. I can't curse them. Lo hibit aven b'Yisrael. That came out of his mouth. Matovu ohalech Yaakov. God sees their tents and they're holy. And they don't commit sins. And they live Torah. You cannot beat them. They're unbeatable. You need to get them to break faith with God by becoming sexually immoral. And that's the only way. And that's what happened. So let's take some time. I know I went on a long time, but this is not like Yael Sisera. And it's not like the more classic honeypot matters. This is reverse honeypot. That sex can be used, but only against Jews in this way. Among other people, you use sex to get political secrets. A man spills the secrets to the prostitute or to his girlfriend. And he tells pillow talk, so-called pillow talk. And he talks to the woman and tells her things that he would never tell his own wife. To show off to the woman, I'm an insider. I know the national secrets. I'm pretty cool. And then the woman's working for the other side. That's classic honeypot. Mordechai Vanunu. Come, let's go to Italy. And he doesn't know he's walking into a Mossad trap. But this is a different kind, only with Jews. I'm going to make you sin. That doesn't work with Italians, Spanish, Russians. I'm going to make you sin against God, God forbid. And I will take away his protection. And one last thing for tonight. I'm sorry, I promised you psukim, more psukim. I'll give you a pasuk tonight, so we don't have with it. But this is so foundational. It's unique to the Jewish people. I want you to see this. Oh, by the way, thank you for being here tonight. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let's see if we can find this. Okay. I want to catch you this. You want to see what I'm talking about? Listen to this. So first of all, look at how sex drives men to destroy themselves. That's step one, how men destroy themselves in pursuit of sex. Today's News, Ken Paxton. So he's not Jewish, nothing to do with Jews, but he's running in a Democrat primary for the United States Senate from Texas against John Cornyn. Cornyn is a more classic middle of the road, what do you want to call him? Democrat, Republican. He's what a lot of the MAGA people call a rhino. And Ken Paxton is a MAGA Republican. And it just came out. He's in the middle of a tough primary, but he's doing strongly. He's the state attorney general, and his wife just filed today for divorce. He's in the middle of his primary. It's a tough primary, but he's a little bit ahead of Cornyn. And imagine what this is going to do to him. Texas State Senator Angela Paxton, he's married. His wife is a state senator too. He's the attorney general. His wife is a state senator. They are a power couple, and he's got a chance to defeat Cornyn. Texas State Senator Angela Paxton announced today she's filed for divorce from State Attorney General Paxton, her long-term husband of 38 years. I filed for divorce on biblical grounds. She filed for divorce on biblical grounds. Don't blame that on my Chumash class. She doesn't attend my Chumash class. So what happened? What does that mean on biblical grounds? That he doesn't hold by Rashbam? That he doesn't hold by Rashi? What does that mean? On biblical grounds, 1 and 1 equals 2. 2 and 2 equals 4. 1 and 2 equals 3. That's the problem. 1 and 2 equals 3. And he tried to make 1 and 2 equal 2. Today, after 38 years, I filed for divorce on biblical grounds. I believe marriage is a sacred covenant. I've earnestly pursued reconciliation, but in light of recent discoveries, I do not believe it honors God. Rabbona Shalom, this guy's cooked. This guy is cooked. How long can he go before he drops out? He's currently running against Cornyn. He's finished. So what leads men to do this and get themselves, what leads men to do this? Frankly, I was afraid as someone who supports Trump. I thought Trump was toast with the Stormy Daniels thing. Thing is, the Democrats overplayed their hand. They brought Trump on so many trials that it got to the point that MAGA people just disregarded. We don't care what he's accused for anymore, because it just never ends. So they overplayed it. But what leads men to do this and get themselves in trouble? It's as powerful a tool as those pagers and walkie-talkies and all the other things. So I share with you these two clips. I talked about it tonight. I talked about it last week. I want you to hear mamish, not my talking, but listen with your own ears to understand, God forbid, a way to understand why Jews have found inexplicably a rise in anti-Semitism in America. Here's the first of two. Recognize this guy? He's speaking at the Democrat National Convention. He's a Jew, right?
Own it. And as I got to know her better and just fell in love fast, I learned what drives Kamala. And it's what you've seen over these past 4 years, and especially these past 4 weeks. She finds joy in pursuing justice. She stands up to bullies just like my parents taught me to. And she likes to see people do well, but hates when they're treated unfairly. She believes this work requires a basic curiosity in just how people are doing. Her empathy is her strength. Over the past decade, Kamala has connected me more deeply to my faith, even though it's not the same as hers. She comes to synagogue with me for high holiday services, and I go to church with her for Easter. I get to enjoy.
Okay, you got that? I didn't just say it. He said it. This is so unacceptable, and he has shameless to say it in public. because that's the state of modern American Jewish life, that he thinks, perhaps correctly, that that's a way to get votes, that he brags he goes to church on Easter. This is what the Jews were doing with Baal Peor. This is what the Midianite women were sent to do, to create a nation of Doug Emhoffs. I'm not saying this this is him telling the public.
Joy in pursuing justice. She stands up to bullies just like my parents taught me to. And she likes to see people do well, but hates when they're treated unfairly. She believes this work requires a basic curiosity in just how people are doing. Her empathy is her strength. Over the past decade, Kamala has connected me more deeply to my faith, even though it's
Can't come closer to your faith than going to church on Easter.
not the same as hers. She comes to synagogue with me for high holiday services, and I go to church with her for Easter. I get to enjoy her mom's chili relleno recipe every Christmas, and she makes
Every Christmas, he's brought closer to his faith. I have been invited to people's homes. Look, I'm an attorney. I have clients. I have been invited to people's homes on Christmas, and they have offered to get a Jewish meal, a kosher meal. If I will give them the name of the caterer or someone, they'll order a special kosher meal for me to be with their family at their Christmas meal. I would never go to a Christmas meal. I love Christians who observe Christmas. I love religious people. No one's a better supporter of Israel than evangelical Christians, but I'd never walk into a Christmas home. It's just an impossibility. To sit and see in a Christmas tree, it's impossible. This is this guy. My wife, I go with her to church on Easter. I have Christmas, and it's beautiful. Look what she does for me on Pesach.
a mean brisket for Passover.
She makes a mean brisket.
It brings me right back to my grandmother's apartment in Brooklyn. You know, the one with the plastic covered couches. But Kamala has fought against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate her whole career.
Thank God Almighty that she did not get elected. That we needed Trump at that time of that war in Baruch Hashem. So anyway, and here's the other one. This I have to read you. This I don't have a clip, but I do have a news article. This is an interview with Huma. The first time Anthony Weiner asked Abedin on a date was in 2001. She declined. She's busy working for Hillary. And by the way, this is not about politics. So we loudly asked Hillary to give Abedin the night off. And Hillary, to Abedin's horror, told her to go have fun. She managed to shake off the obnoxious congressman that night, but they bumped into one another frequently at political events. She was the quiet, well-liked aide who hid from the spotlight. He was the brash congressman who yelled about his political causes to any passing camera, etc., etc. They were friendly. She was falling for him, and so on and so forth. Other men would find this whole Clinton world really overwhelming, but Anthony could handle it. He had no problem with what she described as her limitations, her decision not to have sex till she was married. In other words, she's a devout Muslim. You know, I respect her. You won't get this respect from me out of Huma Abedin. You'll get this respect from me out of the Jews that she marries. But I respect this woman. She's true to her faith, and every Jew that she marries, she brings over to Islam. She's true to her faith. And by the way, she does not do it to attack Judaism. She just wants an honest-to-goodness Muslim home. Something's got to give. And she marries Jews that have no connection to commitment. The man who would soon be routinely described as a sex addict didn't even kiss her until a year into the relationship. And he was fine with that. She'd always assumed she'd marry a Muslim. So he gave up alcohol and pork. Well, that's what it took to get that Jew to give up pork. and fasted during Ramadan alongside her. That's who he is. I could allow myself to marry someone outside my faith. There you go. And then, of course, the tragedy that befell her. This is what happened to American Jews. And what's happening in Sefer Bamidbar, Paragraph A, is that Jews are turning away at the behest of Bil'am. So we'll look at a pasuk or two quickly, and we'll break for the night. And I do promise you next week that as long as I'm doing okay, if I need to postpone a week, just stick with me, and I'll do okay. But here we go. What's the pasuk? So we see. Let's see. While Israel was staying at Shittim, the menfolk prostituted by whoring with the Moabite daughters, who invited the menfolk to the sacrifices for their God. We learned last week that the men came into the tents, the elderly women invited them in to buy linen garments, where they found young, barely clad women who gave them wine, and next thing you knew, they were having sex. And they worshiped that God. We learned about it. Thus, Israel attached itself to Baal. With this, I want to finish. And I'll have the Meforshim next week. This is the last piece for tonight. By Samed Yisrael Baal. If you know Hebrew, the word we would expect would be Vayidbak, Devekut, Devek. We would expect that the word would be that Israel, the men, glued to their God, to Baal Peor. It says rather Vayitzamed, they attached. I don't want to take the time to read the Parish. I'll do it next week. Vayicharaf Hashem b'Yisrael, and God became enraged and furious. I want you to hear this. With this, we close tonight. The Jews did not abandon the God of Israel in this place. They simply took on a secondary auxiliary God. I'm already going to be a member of the Jewish people, and I am connected to the God of Israel. How could I not be? I stood at Mount Sinai. He spoke to me with the 10 pronouncements. I saw the sea split. How can I not be? How can I have faith? But I'm going to take on a secondary auxiliary God also. This woman is hot. She's naked. All the different body parts are straight out of Playboy magazine. The only thing missing is Playboy magazine. And she's what I can't even, she's not what I was always looking for, because I never imagined I could have this. And there she is. And all I have to do is, I don't have to give up my God. I just have to take hers too. Right? I don't have to stop going to brisket on Passover. I just have to go to church on Easter. I don't have to give up high holiday services at my temple. I just have to go to Christmas too. I don't have to tell the Jewish voters in New York that I abandon Jews. I just have to fast on Ramadan. So Vayitzamed instead of Vayidbak. They did not cleave to the God of the Midianites and Moabites. They just took that God on also. And for that, they all die in the plague. 24,000 are killed in the plague by the order of God Almighty. The Bet Din puts them on trial, and they are executed. 24,000. And that's where we go next week. And it applies even today. In order to have God's favor, incomprehensibly, amid 23 Arab nations, with the hatred of all the Europeans, England and France, and all the ones that are worse. How do we survive? By the grace of God Almighty. And when you believe that with all your heart, you're not afraid. And you're confident And you know Mashiach is going to come. The Messiah will come. Whether he's going to come today, or whether he'll be there next week, or whether it'll be in someone else's lifetime, he will come. And what about the threat posed by the Houthis, the Houthim, and this one and that one? They're on the south, the north, the east. They're not afraid in Israel. It's amazing. No one's fleeing from Israel. Some people can't take it, and I don't blame anyone. But as a nation, you've learned this with me in the Sundays. They're flocking back to Israel amid the Armenian missiles. There's no fear. That's the passion that we have. So I appreciate greatly that you attend a class like this, that is a halacha biblical class, and that you recognize and understand that the way to learn halacha and Torah is not simply by learning a translation of Rambam and a translation of the words, but by understanding the deeper underlying hashkafa, what the philosophy is, and understanding the history. And that was the purpose of tonight's class. And next week is going to be straight biblical text, chapter 25, with a lot of commentary. And the week after, we're going to jump 2,000 years ahead to Mordechai Vanunu and some of the more modern honeypot things. Thank you so much for being here. We don't have class on Sunday planned, and instead, God willing, next Tuesday. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Bye-bye.